Sometimes what isn't said speaks louder than what is. That's exactly what royal watchers were buzzing about after King Charles delivered his Armed Forces Day message this year. It was heartfelt, polished, and filled with praise for those who serve the country. But one name was missing: Prince Harry. A decade of military service, 2 tours in Afghanistan, and one of the most visible veteran figures of his generation. And yet, not even a passing mention. You don't just forget someone like Harry, especially not on a day that celebrates the exact thing he dedicated years of his life to. So naturally, eyebrows were raised, questions were asked, and theories started flying. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Just days after the king's statement, Buckingham Palace did something that felt almost surgical in its timing. They put out a press release, one that didn't clarify the Harry omission, didn't walk it back, didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, it spotlighted a different military man entirely. Not a prince, not a royal, just a 100-year-old war veteran named Geoffrey Roberts. And this wasn't a small happy birthday note buried in some tabloid. This was a full-blown royal tribute. Photos, statements, and a public appearance from Princess Anne herself. So let's talk about this man, because his story deserves the spotlight too. Geoffrey Roberts is a veteran of World War II, one of the last surviving links to a generation that literally fought to save the world. He wasn't just part of any operation either. He served in Operation Market Garden, one of the most ambitious and heartbreaking missions of the war. It was supposed to end the fighting early by securing bridges in the Netherlands. What actually happened was chaos. The operation failed, troops were stranded, casualties were massive, and it's now remembered as a bridge too far. Geoffrey was right in the thick of it. He saw the worst of the battle, and when things went south, he didn't get to just go home. He was captured, taken as a prisoner of war, forced to work in a coal mine until the war ended. Just sit with that for a second. Surviving a brutal military operation, then being tossed into the hellish conditions of a POW camp, only to be sent underground doing back-breaking labor day after day. That's not just service, that's survival on a level most of us can't imagine. And yet Geoffrey didn't let any of that define him in bitterness. He came home, built a life, and kept serving in a different way. He dedicated decades to charity, to honoring those who didn't make it back. He didn't fade into the background like many aging veterans do. He became a living memory, a bridge not just to the past, but to the values that shaped it. That's why Princess Anne, who herself is known for being the royal family's hardest worker, personally presented him with an MBE. That's no small gesture. That's royalty showing up with real respect. Now, you might say, what does this have to do with Harry? Why are people making the comparison? Well, because Buckingham Palace made it really hard not to. The timing was too perfect. On one hand, silence on a veteran prince. On the other, full royal fanfare for a centenarian war hero. The palace may not have said anything directly, but the message landed, loud and clear. This is what the crown chooses to highlight. This is who gets honored. Service, endurance, dignity, not controversy, not California headlines. And in the eyes of many, that contrast said more than any official statement ever could. Geoffrey Roberts didn't just survive the war. He became a symbol of something the monarchy seems desperate to hold on to: quiet dignity and lifelong service. He wasn't flashy. He didn't write memoirs or sit for bombshell interviews. He didn't demand attention. He earned it. That's a powerful contrast in a royal ecosystem that's been rattled by drama in recent years. And Buckingham Palace knows exactly what kind of messaging resonates with the public when the institution is under fire. When everything feels shaky, they double down on tradition. But here's what really sealed the moment. The palace released a photo of Princess Anne presenting the MBE to Geoffrey, and this wasn't a stiff, posed, royal snapshot. It was warm, genuine. You could see it in her face, real admiration, and you could see it in his eyes too, gratitude but also pride, the kind that comes from a life that didn't need the spotlight to feel meaningful. It's the kind of image that tells a story without a single word, and it landed hard, not just because of who was in it, but because of who wasn't. Princess Anne showing up in person meant something. She's not the flashiest royal, but she's respected. Her schedule is packed, and yet she made time to honor a 100-year-old veteran. That's the kind of gesture people notice, especially when other royals seem more concerned with brand deals and documentaries. And whether the palace meant it or not, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Of course, Geoffrey's story is more than just a symbol. It's real. He was there during one of the most disastrous Allied operations in the war, Operation Market Garden. When he was captured, he didn't know if he'd ever see home again. He didn't know if he'd survive. And yet, after months of brutal labor in a German coal mine, he came out alive. Not bitter, not broken, just determined to make that survival matter. After the war, he didn't disappear into quiet retirement. He got involved. He raised money. He told his story. He made sure the memory of the Battle of Arnhem and those who died there didn't fade with time. He became a guardian of history. That's why last year he stood alongside Princess Anne again, this time not for a personal award, but for a ceremony marking 80 years since the battle. 8 decades later, he was still showing up, still honoring those who didn't get to come home. That's more than commendable. It's rare. The palace statement highlighted all of this, painting a full picture of the man behind the medal. They weren't just honoring a war hero, they were reminding the public of the kind of values they still want to stand for. Courage, endurance, humility. That's what Geoffrey embodied, and that's why this tribute hit so hard. Some might say the whole thing was carefully orchestrated, that it was a PR move to shift attention away from royal riffs. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Maybe it was strategic. Maybe it was sincere. Maybe it was both. Either way, the message landed. If the monarchy wants to remain relevant, this is how it does it, by reminding people what real service looks like. And Geoffrey Roberts? He's not just a reminder, he's a lesson. A living blueprint for everything the monarchy claims to uphold. He didn't ask for applause, but when it came, he stood tall and took it with grace. Geoffrey Roberts' story didn't just capture the attention of the royal family, it hit home with the entire country. In a time when the nation is constantly navigating change, division, and headlines dominated by celebrity spats or royal tension, the tale of a quiet hero brought a wave of clarity, no controversy, no drama, just a man who lived through hell, came back stronger, and spent the next 80 years giving back. It's the kind of legacy that doesn't need a press tour, it speaks for itself. There's something almost poetic about how this moment unfolded. On a day meant to honor military service, the royal spotlight shifted to someone who had no titles, no palace, no Netflix deals, just grit and heart, and that rare old school brand of duty that doesn't come with an agenda. The timing might have sparked conversation, but the content stole the show. People saw the face of a man who actually put on a uniform, fought in a real war, suffered, and still carried himself with grace. That sticks with you in a way gossip never can. It also reminded the public of something they rarely get to see in the headlines anymore: authenticity. Geoffrey didn't need to make a statement about the monarchy, the military, or his place in history. His actions over the decades said everything. His willingness to return year after year to ceremonies, to raise funds for other veterans, to educate younger generations about what really happened in Arnhem, those things mattered. They still do. That's the deeper takeaway from this whole moment. Beyond the obvious media interpretations or assumptions about royal intentions, this was about values, and not just vague ceremonial ones, but real earned values. Endurance, service, gratitude, those are hard to fake, and in a world filled with spin and spectacle, people can still tell the difference between performance and truth. Princess Anne's role in this can't be overlooked either. She didn't show up as part of a royal checklist. She showed up as someone who genuinely respects veterans and understands what it means to serve without needing applause. That's why she's admired even by those who aren't exactly fans of the monarchy as an institution. She brings the kind of quiet strength that feels rare in a public figure. Her presence elevated the tribute into something more than ceremonial. It became personal, meaningful. The image of Anne presenting the MBE to Geoffrey wasn't just a nice photo op. It was a symbol of continuity, of one generation recognizing another, of one servant of the nation honoring another, without hierarchy, without ego, just mutual respect. And for many watching, that was the kind of royal moment they'd been craving for years. One that felt grounded, sincere. So while some viewers may still debate the Harry question, the omission, the optics, and what it all means behind the scenes, this tribute to Geoffrey Roberts carved out a space far beyond the noise. It reminded people that the crown, at its best, isn't about fame or gossip. It's about memory, honor, legacy, and the people who carry those things quietly for a lifetime. Geoffrey's 100th birthday became more than a celebration. It was a moment of national reflection. A quiet veteran standing tall as history looked back and saluted him. And as he held that medal in his hands, you could almost feel it. He wasn't just being thanked, he was being remembered, not as a footnote, but as a force, a man who lived a century and made every year count.